Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as I show you my process for dividing and transplanting heuchera. So let's go. Heuchera, also known as coral bells, are hardy here where I live in New Hampshire Zone 5B. There are so many colors and variations of heuchera. And guess what? There aren't just heucheras. There are also heucherellas as well as tiarellas. And I want to have as many of those type of plants in my yard because where I live, there's a lot of shade. And in those shady areas, it tends to get kind of dark. So I want to include different plants that have different colors, different leaf structures in those shady areas so they really pop. Now, heucheras tend to be short-lived, maybe not all of them, but definitely some varieties. So that's one of many reasons on why you want to divide your heucheras every 3 to 5 years. Another reason you'd want to divide them is a lot of times they die out in the center where the crown is. And so you want to make sure that you're really dividing them every few years to maximize the number of plants that are in your yard, but also to promote a very healthy plant. In this one section of my yard, I have a ton of heuchera. I really only started with a few of each type of plants, and then I've divided and moved them along the years. And I'm glad I did because now I have other areas in my yard where I want to move some of these plants to. So today I'm going to show you my process for digging up the plant and then moving it to a new location. I'm just going to use a regular shovel, and when you dig, you want to make sure you're not digging immediately at the base or the crown of the plant. You want to be out away from the base by at least a few inches. And fortunately, the roots are not very deep, which makes it a lot easier to dig up a plant like this. I'm just trying to remove some of the soil so I can expose the roots. One thing that I did not do in the springtime was remove any of the last year's foliage. So now is a good time for me to go ahead and do that. I'm just going to be using hand pruners. And while I'm removing this foliage, I just wanted to talk about a few things. Coral bells or heuchera tend to heave up during the winter months. And what that means is that you might find that your plant has come out of the ground a little bit. And that's absolutely normal and natural. A lot of heuchera tend to do that. And if that does ever happen to you in the early spring months, what you want to do is just dig up the plant and put it back in deeper into the ground, and it'll be just fine. Also, it's the end of June, and here I am digging up and dividing heuchera. You can really do that with many of your perennials. The key is make sure that you water it really well, not only the day that you divide and move a plant, but you want to continue doing that, especially if you're having long periods of drought. You want to make sure your plant has enough time to get established. You don't want it to dry out. And right now my heuchera is blooming. If I wanted to, I could remove the blooms. In fact, a lot of people grow this type of plant specifically just for the foliage and not the blossoms. And if I find that the blossoms are not looking good after a day or so, I can go ahead and just cut them back. Now, this is a pretty small piece of heuchera, and that's because I just divided it a few years ago. But nevertheless, I'm going to show you my process for dividing a plant like this. And if you had a bigger piece, you would end up with a lot more sections. The key is you want to make sure each section has some amount of roots on it. And sometimes you'll find that there are old pieces of root on here. You can remove those. Those are just old woody pieces of root that are not necessary. Some perennials are pretty easy. You can just pull them apart. But with heucheras, I like to use a sharp cutting instrument. You can use a knife, but I like to use what's called a pruning saw. And it looks like this, and it's just a small hand pruning saw. And it closes like that and opens like that. Just always be careful with anything that's sharp. And also make sure that you sanitize all your tools in between different plants because you don't want to carry disease from one plant to another. And I'm looking for a natural place where I could divide this. And I'm seeing right here that I have a piece over here, and then I have a few pieces on this side. So I'm going to go ahead and make my cut right down the center here. I'm just going to tug them apart. And now you can see we have a nice good piece here with a lot of roots to it. And I can see again that I can prune off some pieces. And then here is another bigger piece that I can also go ahead, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut it into another small piece. And there we go. We turned one heuchera plant into 3 plants. Let's go ahead and get these moved to a different part of my yard. This bed is what I call work in progress, which is like many beds in my yard, which is super exciting because there's opportunity. And you can see that I have some darker colored heuchera here. And then I have this pistachio light green colored heuchera here as well as down over there. And what I'm thinking of doing in this garden space over the next few weeks is just jam packing it with lots of different shade loving plants. And I'm going to lean heavily on the heuchera that I already have in my landscape because I'm all about shopping my own yard for free plants, dividing them and moving them around. And I think it will look really nice having that dark colored leaf of the heuchera that we dug up, and it has a silver vein to it, and adding that over in pockets in this garden. I think that's going to look really nice. So let's go ahead and get some of those plants planted right in this pocket over here. The first thing I'm going to do is just remove the mulch because I have the mulch here to hold in moisture and also to suppress weeds. And I want to make sure I'm digging up a deep enough hole to put the roots in. And fortunately, the roots of the heuchera are not very big, so the hole doesn't need to be very deep. Here are the roots. Let's go ahead and get them placed in the soil, and then we will backfill the soil around the roots. Backfill the mulch. And that's it. We're going to go ahead and do the same process and plant the other 2 heuchera. Even though no plant is 100% truly rabbit or deer resistant, I found that the deer don't seem to bother with my heuchera. So it's my preference to plant a lot of heuchera around my landscape. I do have hosta, but I am leaning heavily on planting the heuchera because they just seem to leave my heuchera plants alone. Whenever you put mulch around a plant, you don't want to put it too heavily around the plant. You don't want to suffocate the plant. So I'm just trying to do it a little bit lightly around my plant here. As we add this 3rd plant into this area here, you can see just how nicely the leaves look in this area with the silver veining and how it complements nicely with the other 2 heuchera. And that's the look that I'm really going for in this spot. I also have drip irrigation set up in this bed, which makes it super nice and convenient when it comes to these plants as well as other plants in my landscape. Typically, heuchera prefer part shade or full shade conditions. So this location does get a few hours of sun a day, but not a lot. So these heucheras should thrive in this location. I am really loving how this heuchera looks here. And what's very exciting is I can just keep on filling in gaps as I go when it comes to putting more heuchera in these spots. Lots of opportunity going on over here. So what are you waiting for? Get out there and start buying heuchera or dividing the heuchera that's in your landscape. It is such a fun, versatile plant, and it really deserves a spot in your yard, especially if you have shady areas like I do. If you have any questions or comments at all, I'd love to hear from you. Please drop them down in the comment section below. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please consider subscribing. It's free to you and it really helps me out. Don't forget to hit the notification bell. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.